um, our guest speaker today is Louise Jett. Louise is a lifelong learner and educator at heart. She is a leader in training at the American Ethical Union, and she is a former Mosler Fellowship recipient. She served as a media specialist at Lewis and Clark Community College and adjunct faculty member at LNC for 8 years. Louise is now a full-time faculty member and coordinator of LNC's graphic design and web development programs. She considers herself a congregational humanist and is truly inspired by people who are dedicated to empowering others. Louise, welcome, and thank you for speaking with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. So before I begin, I invite everyone to take a moment to practice some ethical mindfulness and some deep breathing. It helps me prepare to deliver my talk. We do this at the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and I think it can help prepare you to listen. So I have a visual. Let's do some deep breathing and become present in the space that we're in. Thank you for indulging me. There's something very satisfying about that symbol becoming full circle. Good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for inviting me. Today, I'm going to talk about embracing failure. Failure, it happens, right? But do you flinch maybe just a little bit when you hear the word mistake or failure? Or are you really hard on yourself when you make a mistake? Does it sometimes keep you up at night? I know I can relate to those things. And when writing this talk, I thought deeply about failure, about those times I made mistakes. And some of my failures were almost too painful to revisit, even years later. Moments of shame and defeat, moments when, despite giving my all, I fell short of my own expectations. So I can only imagine how the captain of this ship must have felt. If you didn't see this in the news, a 1,300-foot shipping container ship, the Ever Given, blocked the Suez Canal for 6 days, and the internet instantly set out to poke fun via memes and other jokes. For many, this was a laughing matter, even a relatable moment. And I know I shared this meme on social media. It perfectly illustrates how impossibly hard the pandemic has been for me and my determination to succeed despite of it. My will to become unstuck, to be free of the trauma caused by COVID-19 and life in general. As my friend Sandra commented on my post, y'all had an extra hard year in an extra hard year. And honestly, I feel like a lot of us have. So while this moment captured the world's attention and set the internet's imagination ablaze, I know if I were navigating those waters, if I were responsible for leaving more than 400 ships stuck on either side of the canal, clogging one of the biggest shipping routes in the world and disrupting global trade during a pandemic, I wouldn't feel good about it. And I believe there are forces totally out of the captain and crew's control. For one thing, the ship is simply too big. The skyscraper-sized ship weighed 200,000 metric tons. Critics worry that in a rush to cram as many goods as possible on these mega ships, we're setting ourselves up for more modern cargo ship disasters. And the size of the ship is not up to the captain, and neither is the weather. The ship's owners claim a gust of wind caused the boat to get stuck. Investigators are still trying to figure out exactly what happened, but an incomplete investigation hasn't stopped Egyptian authorities from demanding $1 billion for the cost of freeing the ship, the loss of transit fees, and other costs incurred from the blocking of the canal. Obviously, this was not a good day for the crew. And I know even on my worst day at work, I don't make a $1 billion mistake. Failing, making mistakes are both a natural part of the learning process. In fact, our mistakes help us find areas in which we can grow and learn and improve our abilities and approaches. When talking about failure, we must first differentiate between failures and mistakes. Failure is simply the lack of success, while a mistake is an action or judgment that is misguided or wrong. Repeated failures are mistakes, but sometimes failure is totally out of our control. In reality, neither failures or mistakes in and of themselves are bad. Of course, we must try to avoid making stupid mistakes, but we should not be afraid of taking risks or failing. We can learn from both. Many mistakes have led to revelations. For example, in fact, many inventions were totally accidental. Even chocolate chip cookies were invented on accident. Ruth Graves Wakefield was preparing some chocolate cookies for her guests, but she realized she was out of baker's chocolate. She improvised by chopping up a block of semi-sweet chocolate, thinking it would melt and spread evenly throughout the batter. Instead, she pulled the very first batch of chocolate chip cookies out of the oven, and I am grateful for her discovery. But many of our failures and mistakes don't bear such delicious fruit so instantly. In fact, experts say people should give themselves a little bit of time to recover from a fresh failure before analyzing the fiasco in a sophisticated way. Thoughtfully, we can recognize hidden teachable moments. It is only through the identification of specific problems that we can effectively analyze our failures and mistakes in a constructive way. And this leads me to ponder, how can I be courageous enough to take risks and be wise enough to learn from those times I fail, especially when making mistakes and falling short of my goals causes frustration, shame, and disappointment. According to a clinical psychologist named Guy Winch, there are 4 keys to learning from failure. First, I should reevaluate my planning. How much time did I spend planning out the best route to achieve a goal or task? Many people spend little, if any, time on planning. There are a ton of planning resources available. I can learn a lot by looking back at a failed project and seeing how the planning process and implementation could have been better executed. Hindsight is 20/20. Next, I should also reevaluate my preparation. Even some professionals skip this step altogether, but it is such a crucial one. Putting elements in place increases the likeliness of success and minimizes the likeliness of obstacles. We have to set ourselves up to succeed. After a failed project, I should ask, what resources did I lack? In what ways could I have better been prepared? Next, I should reevaluate my execution and my efforts. Were they consistent? When and where did I drop the ball? When and where did drops in my efforts occur? Which external circumstances set my efforts back? If I can anticipate such events, I can learn how to successfully address them in the future. And last of all, I should focus on variables in my control. Even though failing can make me feel powerless and worthless, sometimes I have control over more than I think. Other times, I have no control at all. After failing, I should ask myself, How can I improve my skills that specifically contributed to the failure instead of beating myself up for things I realistically could not have changed? Maybe I need some one-on-one mentoring, or I could reach out for tips and advice and hopefully figure out better ways to take initiatives and or improve my time management without getting discouraged and giving up completely. When I go through this process of evaluating and rectifying, I am embracing a growth mindset. Our brains are designed to develop, and challenges are an important part of training our brains. But our post-mistake decisions can make a huge impact despite our best intentions. We must understand that mistakes are a key part of the learning process, and mistakes can be both harmful and helpful, even simultaneously. With a little effort, we can identify the positive opportunities that come out of mistakes. But mistakes are harmful when we allow them to hurt our learning process. We get discouraged. We don't reflect on our mistakes, and we don't own up to them. We also avoid taking risks or doing tasks we've made mistakes in before. Mistakes are absolutely most harmful when they make us afraid to even try. Instead, a growth mindset encourages us to learn from mistakes. There are actually types of mistakes you may recognize, and some strategies for transforming these common errors into opportunities for growth and compassion. For example, if you've made a mistake or failed, you may just need to slow down. A slowdown opportunity is an accident or a silly mistake, but they still hurt, just like big mistakes. It may be caused by rushing through tasks or not thinking before you speak. It's something you can fix on your own by properly managing your time, being more thoughtful, and pacing yourself. Slow down a bit. Check your progress as you go. Take breaks when you need them. Ignoring these mistakes in the short term could cause you to repeat them again and again, slowing you down much more in the long term. For me, anything worth doing is worth doing right, and I prefer a deliberate approach, if at all possible, and I try to choose my words wisely. Other times, mistakes present us with an opportunity for review. A review opportunity is a medium-sized mistake, something you don't quite understand yet, but you know where to look for better understanding. There are major learning gains to be made by reviewing and reflecting on a concept I missed or misunderstood. I can learn a lot by examining hidden biases and checking myself for harmful beliefs and acts or thoughts of discrimination. If I do fall short of living my values, I try to take some time to understand my missteps and identify ways to be accountable and open-minded. I own my mistakes. I can't always make things right, but I can always listen and learn, which leads me to a feedback opportunity. There are things I cannot figure out on my own, no matter how hard I try. Perspectives I simply do not see. Still, I don't allow a fixed mindset to take over. Taking the time to reflect on big, painful, often interpersonal mistakes is extremely valuable. By reflecting on these mistakes, I can complete a huge piece of the puzzle in my brain and possibly strengthen bonds between myself and those important to me. Listening to understand the harm I have caused is important after I make a mistake. Sometimes the biggest mistakes in our lives result in failed relationships. Embracing feedback opportunities can help us better understand and care for one another, even our global community. But sometimes visionaries are right. People say they're wrong, even when a lot of people say they're wrong. So we must know when to take feedback to heart and when to move on without giving up on our dreams or approaches. Sometimes we disappoint the right people. In fact, one could argue that ethical culture founder Felix Adler disappointed his congregation, a failure that led to the founding of ethical culture. Adler and his family came to the US from Germany when he was 6 years old. He was the son of a prominent rabbi in New York, and when he was 15 years old, he went back to Germany to study. He attended both the University of Berlin and the University of Heidelberg. While he was in Germany, it was like a curtain had lifted from his eyes, and he had seen the world for the first time. He lost his belief in a man like God, and he became a non-theist. When he returned to the United States to become a rabbi and spoke to his father's congregation, one over which he was meant to take control, he omitted any mention of God from his sermon, and the congregation rejected him. Some might see this as a huge failure. Had Adler failed to live up to his responsibilities? I don't think so. Instead, he strived to express his beliefs despite opposition. He envisioned communities that were committed to ethical living and dedicated to moral action in the absence of belief in a God or eternal rewards or damnations. And he didn't give up on that belief. Instead, he found ethics as the common ground and at the root of diverse religions, spiritual doctrines, and humanist thoughts. Some people scoffed at the idea of a church without God, and many people still do. The phrase remains revolutionary today, but Adler thankfully championed forth. By disappointing one congregation, he created a long-lasting space where communities like this one can exist. I can only hope my failures are so productive and positively impactful. And I fail a lot, but I also succeed often. For every time I have been triumphant, I have failed at least twice. And my friends have noticed I have often been asked on several occasions to explain how I find my courage to try. For me, regret cuts deeper than failure, and not taking a chance is worse than making mistakes. Because if I were constantly afraid to fail, I would never pursue opportunities. I wouldn't be where I am today. I set goals and I strive to reach them. I may be a professor now, but the first time I went to college at the age of 18, I was forced to drop out because of an injury. As a freshman at the Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, during my second semester, I broke my ankle while walking to class. A misstep led to a fall, and I actually crushed the cartilage in my ankle and required surgery. I had to withdraw from my classes and head home to heal during a time when my parents were going through a divorce. My cartilage was not the only thing that was crushed. This event was soul crushing to me. I was devastated on so many levels. I had always been a good straight A student, and earning my bachelor's degree was extremely important to me. I wanted to be a scientific journalist, but I felt like a total failure. It would take me years to bounce back. I worked entry-level jobs at restaurants and eventually became a manager of a popular pizza place. It was hard work, but I loved my crew. Still, I had a deep sense that I was settling for a menial job when I really wanted to do so much more. I've always had a deep sense of social justice, and I wanted to educate people in the hopes of making the world a better place. Instead, I was making pizzas. After I became pregnant with my son, Keenan, who is now 18, wow, time flies. The older I get, the faster it goes. But once I realized at age 25 that I would be responsible for another human being, a feeling of responsibility washed over me like I had never felt before. Not just for my unborn baby, but also for myself. Did I want my child to give up on his education after a setback? Absolutely not. Did I want my son to strive to live his best life? Absolutely. I believe we only have one life to live, so we must give it our all. But how could I demand something from my son when I wasn't willing to do the hard work myself? I knew once Keenan was old enough, I would have to go back to school. I snapped out of my cognitive dissonance, and for the first time in a long time, I started setting new goals. First, have a healthy baby. Next, get an education and find a way to pull my family out of poverty while contributing to making the world a better place. Poverty forces you to live in survival mode. Poverty isn't a personal failure, it's a reflection on our society. But education can be a great equalizer. In it, many life-changing opportunities can be found. I wouldn't be where I am today without Lewis and Clark Community College. The college has been a part of my life for more than a decade. When Keenan was around 3 years old, I enrolled at Lewis and Clark. I was seeking a better life, and I stayed 3 years, earning 2 degrees, an Associate of Arts and an Associate of Applied Science and Graphic Design. I served as editor-in-chief of The Bridge, LNC's student newspaper. I won many awards for my leadership, my writing, and my dedication. I secured a full scholarship, and then I earned my bachelor's degree from Greenville University on LNC's campus. I eagerly watched the college's job postings, checking every day to see if there would be an opportunity for me there. I wanted to give back to this community that had helped me so very much. After I left the college, I became the editor of a newspaper and eventually went on to work as a marketing director at a nonprofit. But like I said, I wanted to go back to Lewis and Clark. After becoming an LNC staff member, I earned my master's degree in education from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And eventually I became advisor of that student newspaper. And last fall, I reached the goal of becoming a full-time faculty member and program coordinator. This accomplishment brings me almost indescribable joy because this is a specific goal I set. I will find myself reflecting on this success and almost it brings me to tears. I just feel so very proud and to be able to have the privilege to see my work pay off. The coordinator of the graphic and web design program had taken me out to lunch shortly after I was hired at Lewis and Clark as a staff member. And he was a former instructor of mine, and he told me he would be retiring in about 4 years. He said I would be a great candidate for his position. And I was like, what? He gave me excellent advice on things I could do to position myself to be considered for the position, like earning my master's degree and teaching some classes. So he brought me on as an adjunct faculty member. He saw this incredible potential in me that I had not recognized. He encouraged me to develop a brand new course in social media marketing and recommended that possibility to the deans of the college. He was an advocate for me. He was a support system that I had never had before. He planted seeds in me and in others, and I became more and more comfortable with this idea of me reaching for such a lofty goal. I taught classes and I worked full-time. I developed that marketing course and I still teach it today. I worked long hours and I hoped the work would pay off, but I knew that nothing was guaranteed. Still, I kept hustling anyway. I found that I am an educator at heart. I realized I wanted to dedicate my life to connecting students and colleagues with the resources they need to live meaningful, successful lives, to build a more equitable and just world. I strive to be the charismatic adult for my students that my mentor was for me. I wanted to show them the islands of competency that they held within themselves, places from which they could draw inspiration and strength and the motivation to succeed. I wanted to introduce them to possibilities they may never have considered. This remains a top priority for me. And it might sound familiar to you because eliciting the best in others and thereby cultivating my best self is all a part of this process. And it has paid off. The student newspaper staff just won 22 awards at a statewide competition, including a first place for best student media and a second place in general excellence. Both are considered top prizes. The gratitude expressed by my students is priceless, and they have explicitly told me I opened up possibilities and recognized talents that they were themselves unable to see without my mentorship, without my affirmation. My son has obviously been paying attention as well. My sweet, curious baby has become a compassionate, adventurous young adult. He graduated high school in December and is planning a month-long hike to the Appalachian Mountains early this spring before he starts college at Lewis and Clark this fall. And he wants to explore his options and decide on his path forward. I could not be prouder of his intellect and empathy. He loves to read and think deeply and critically and have meaningful conversations. He has always been one of my favorite philosophers, and I'm so excited as I watch his life unfold. My heart can barely handle all the love that I hold for him. I will always be grateful for his presence in my life, and I will always appreciate the fact that I didn't give up on my own dreams, and now he is following his. But why did it take another life for me to care? Why couldn't I love myself enough to try without this extra incentive? Sometimes success doesn't look the way we expect it to. Oftentimes, the road is longer and more difficult than we can ever imagine. Redefining success can help us overcome our fear of failing. As Mary Oliver once wrote, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" If we give in to our failures, if we settle for the way things are instead of reshaping our lives, we cannot be committed to living a meaningful life. Instead, we must fail forward. We can do so by setting realistic goals, thinking deeply about our mistakes, and cultivating perseverance within ourselves and others. Maybe we need to reconsider the size of our ship and prepare for the route to take much longer than we ever planned. I invite you to consider a time when you tried your best and still made mistakes. How did you react? Why can mistakes be detrimental to our learning and our brain growth? Is there an example in your life or someone else's life of a time mistakes prevented you or another person from doing something great? What will you do the next time you make a mistake? I hope you seize it as a learning opportunity. I hope you embrace it as an opportunity and a chance to make the world a more just and equitable place for yourself and for others. I hope you love yourself in a way that opens up mistakes as they bloom before you so that you can recognize the gift that they truly are. Thank you for listening to my story. I welcome your questions and thoughts on the topics I have covered, and I'd love to hear some of your answers to the questions that I've just posed.
Thank you so much. My first thought is just how I grew up, I talk about growing up a lot. Anyway, in a very fundamentalist religion, and I had the verse, "Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect," like memorized that and tried to live by that. And that pressure of always having to get it right, because also like God was the one that was guiding my steps, and God was the one that called me to do this and called me to do that. And so like failing at a thing was like, did I mishear God? Did I lie to myself? You know, like there were lots of things that were attached to all of it. And so there is this like just this sigh of relief to understand how mistakes are just a part of life. And I talk about that with my oldest now, just on that, like this is what we do. This is what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. Like, we're going to make mistakes, and that is just a part of living. And it matters how you act after you make a mistake. That's the important part. But like, the mistakes are part of the deal. And that there's just so much freedom in that for me. Thank you so much. These words were wonderful.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you brought up the fact kind of as your religion as a child, because I was a very religious child, and my family, my mom and dad were atheists. And I asked them, I said, Aunt Rosalie died. And I said, where did Aunt Rosalie go? And Mom said, well, some people think she went to heaven, and some people think she's just gone. And I said, well, what do we think? Oh, she just gone. I was like, whoa, wait a minute here. She's just gone. Okay, that's not good enough for me. So I sought out religion myself, and I went to church on my own. My parents stayed home. I was one of the youngest due-paying members of a Baptist church. And I just thought very critically about all the things that they taught me. I was the one, asking where the dinosaurs were in the Bible. And I never really felt saved. So we would have these revivals, and I would always go back with the preacher. I felt like such a failure.
I was baptized 3 times. I know, I understand this.
Right? And I felt like a failure in my religious pursuits. And I finally, I embraced reason and science. And the older that I got, I realized that these were fairy tales that I really didn't believe in. And that's why I never felt saved, right? That's why I always felt like I fell short when trying to learn and embrace this religiosity that I thought that I needed. So yeah, I just appreciate that you bring that up, because wrapped up in that is a lot of guilt and shame, and it can make you very afraid to take risks and to try. And there is no courage in the absence of fear. So I just had to kind of reevaluate my life. I know Kurt Vonnegut helped me a lot. He led me to humanism as a teenager. I kind of lost my faith, discovered Kurt Vonnegut, and then I thought, well, I don't need God to be good, and I can still do good within this world. So my priorities didn't change, but the path there definitely did. Andy.
Thank you very much for your talk. It really brought something to mind that I hadn't thought of for a long time. One of my biggest failures as a young person that just was devastated me, but I managed to persevere. It was very important when I was a teenager to have a driver's license. And I practiced driving with my father and my mother. I practiced and practiced and practiced. And when I turned 18, I was able to take the test. And all my friends were passing, and I failed it. I said, all right, well, I'll take it again. I failed it again. Practice, practice, practice. Every time I took that test, I failed it. It took me, I was thinking of just giving up. And I said, well, maybe the reason I failed it is maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not as good a driver as I think I am. And so I kept practicing and practicing and failing. And finally, after 2 years and 6 driving tests, I finally passed. And even after I passed, I realized that I wasn't a good driver. I got tickets. I engaged in stupid behavior when I was driving. And it really took me until I was about 30 to be a decent driver. But boy, that was quite an experience, and I learned a lot.
Right. Sometimes the road is much longer than we think it's going to be. And just to kind of comment, you reminded me that from when I was in junior high school, I wanted to be a cheerleader so bad. And I tried out in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And I didn't make it in 6th grade. I could not do a round off to save my life. I tried out in 6th grade, I failed. I tried out in 7th grade, I failed. 8th grade, all the summer before 8th grade, all I did was round offs, like all summer long. And I made it. I got to be a cheerleader for 1 year. And my personality, I am a total cheerleader, right? I am an affirming, loving, uplifting individual. So just, you know, you might not see me as like a popular cheerleader kid. Trust me, I wasn't. I didn't, it wasn't a popularity contest. I had to work really hard to achieve that goal. But had I given up in 6th grade, I never would have known that joy. And, you know, and like seeing myself as a cheerleader, you know, my personality type is a campaigner. So I am a supporting person, you know, and it just kind of tapped this, like I didn't even realize why I wanted to be a cheerleader until I finally became a cheerleader. So I love that story and not giving up. And especially when you're younger, because it can be soul crushing, you know, to fail. But I just decided early on, and I had mentors and teachers who told me, you know, don't give up. Reach a goal, set a new goal. And I just really listened and I was open to that. And I really, really appreciated my teachers. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to become an educator myself. And I think Danielle has hand up. You're muted.
Sorry. So I've had almost the exact opposite of you guys having like positive people. For me, it's always been, you're not gonna do this. You should probably look into something else. So if I was gonna do something, it was always gonna be because I wanted to have it done. Literally, my senior year of college, you know, you go into the guidance counselor's office and they talk to you about what, you know, what you should expect, what you should be doing. And my guidance counselor literally sat me down and said, you might want to look into something other than college. Now, the problem with this was I had missed a lot of days of school and I was like a C student, but that was because no one had noticed that like my home life was horrible. And it wasn't because I wasn't smart enough to do it. It was that I didn't care because there was nothing there at school to, you know, there was no one ever, you know, pushing me to say, hey, is something going on? You know, can we help you with anything? And then I ended up going to a community college, making straight A's, moving on to a 4-year, you know, university and doing just fine there. But it was because I decided that if I wanted something to happen, it had to happen because I wanted it to, because no one else was going to make that happen for me. No one else saw any real potential. So
thank you for sharing. And yeah, and despite that setback, you know, and I do see the privilege in having the mentors that I've had. My parents were very young when they had me. My mom was 17 and my dad was 19. And they were busy and they were young and they didn't know what they were doing. And my grandma filled me with love. She just filled me with love and taught me to love myself. And, you know, my father was constantly disappointed in me because 1, he had girls and he wanted boys. And 2, he's not an intellectual. I love to read. I'm an intellectual. And I would buy my dad books and I would try to get him to read. And we're different people, right? We're not on the same wavelength. So I always felt like a failure to my father, you know, and I decided I'm going to do this for me. But yeah, I did have those supportive people there to help me. And I know that's luck, that success takes luck and hard work. And it helps when you have privilege too. For example, when I went to Lewis and Clark, I already had my son and we were poor and I needed daycare. Daycare is so expensive. So I applied for help with daycare. I kept getting rejected. I was literally in a bathroom crying on the campus of Lewis and Clark when an advisor came in and they were like, why are you crying? What's the matter? And I told them, she took me to her office. She called the organization through which I was applying, got someone on the phone, which I hadn't been able to do. I didn't know why they were rejecting my application. I didn't know why they wouldn't help me. She realized I wasn't putting my name at the top of every page. So they counted my application as incomplete. And I would have never, had she not advocated for me, I was sitting in that bathroom crying because I was going to have to drop out of school because I couldn't figure out how to get the resources I need. If she hadn't had to go to the bathroom at that time, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I realized that it is luck. And, you know, there are things that are out of our control, and a lot of privilege plays into my success as well. So kudos to you, because, even with all the setbacks and without the support, you were able to go on and go to community college and get that degree that you wanted. So I really commend you for that. And I tell my students, if you want to succeed in something, everything you do needs to be towards that goal, and you still might not get there because it's hard, it's competitive, and it takes luck, and it takes relationships and people to support you, and we all don't have that. So thank you for sharing that perspective. I saw Mike's hand up, and then we'll go to Mary Ellen.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. Great talk, and stuff on growth mindset and things. Yeah, I, like Angie, was raised in a pretty far right kind of evangelical environment, and so I did, like her, struggle with learning to take failure personally. And it was also kind of a moralistic church, so they talked about grace and stuff, but kind of the unwritten message was that, well, it's very important that you be good, that you be right, especially if you're a man. There were a lot of men, a lot of toxic masculinity. So I think that has always still been challenging for me to get over that and dealing with failures, especially personal ones. My work in science has been really good at teaching me to embrace failure as part of that process. But I think when it comes to personal failure and social failures, I still struggle with that religious perspective of, maybe even going so far as to avoid situations in which I might commit something that my former days would be considered a sin, be conflict avoidant, be that kind of thing. So that's kind of where my struggle is now. And I don't know, I wonder if anybody else has struggled with that weird dichotomy where they are okay failing at work or at school and learning from that, but then still feel like they don't have the freedom to fail personally and to learn from that and to experience those icky feelings of, oh, what's wrong with me, that kind of thing.
Yes, I can totally relate. And kind of what your comment made me think is there's a big backlash right now to purity culture, right? Where where we women and girls like me were taught that sex is shameful, our bodies are shameful, we tempt boys and it's not on them, it's on us, So when people who live in that environment grow up, these women are really uncomfortable with their bodies, and they cannot take pleasure in intimacy because their minds have been trained that it is shameful and it is wrong and it is sinful. And they still deal with this, much older and later in life. And even after they've left the church, and they no longer believe these things because it's been so ingrained and indoctrinated in them. And, I struggled with guilt over losing my religion for a long time because I was a very religious child. I mean, we're talking church 3 times a week, pray. I wrote poems to Jesus. I was empty, and I was looking for connection and community, right? And I found it in a church. But that's why I think congregational humanism speaks so much to me, right? Because I still have the support in the community without the dogma and without, having to believe in ridiculous things that I just can't, reasonably believe. yeah, that shame and that guilt. So one of the ways that I kind of temper that in myself is I'll have a knee-jerk reaction, right, to something I did, and then I'll always use metacognition to reflect on why I felt that way. And another thing I'll do is I'll say, well, I believe this, but then I will put myself in a theoretical situation. How would I behave? Because how I behave is more important than what I believe. And then I find, maybe I don't really believe that. I might say I believe that, but my behavior dictates maybe I don't. So again, just kind of really being thoughtful and considerate, and not in a very non-judgmental way, in a way that says, I am human, I am going to fail, I'm going to have bad thoughts, I'm going to be tempted to do things that are unethical, but ultimately, I'm not going to rush into things. I'm going to think, and I'm going to give myself love and grace. Because like I have failed so many times and felt such deep shame and guilt about it. I went through like, what failures am I going to share with these people? And literally, and some of the stupid ones, they hurt the most, because I found out it was this shame. It was always when shame, guilt were attached to failure that I felt most harmed by it. But if I can take that opportunity, turn it into a learning moment, then there's value there. So, the harm, yes, is done, but some good can come out of it too. Yeah. And I think being super thoughtful is very important.
No, I even got a fair bit of shame from purity culture as a guy. I wasn't made to feel guilty for tempting women or whatever, but, feel guilty for looking at women in a certain way, or, like even, stuff that's not inappropriate, just, natural. And a lot of sounds like some crazy church that Angie grew up in were really even much harder on the women even than the men. But it still affects me even to this day, feeling guilt around.
I agree. It takes a long time to retrain our brains.
Well, I love what you said about metacognition. Where is this coming from? Where's this thought?
Right. And many people, and I encourage it in my students so much. I explicitly talk about metacognition, thinking about thinking, because we don't value critical thinking in our society. And we don't teach students to think critically. We teach them to regurgitate facts. We teach them to memorize things, but that doesn't give them the perseverance and the grit that they need to think on their feet in real world situations, that they need to actually be thoughtful, compassionate with themselves, thoughtful with themselves, and actually put time and effort into planning, setting goals. So some people just stumble their way through life. And I know before I had my son, I was happy just pissing my life away. I tell my friends that all the time. Like I was a bartender. I worked at Subway. I went out with my friends on the weekend. I wasn't concerned about like making the world a better place or anything like that. But in the back of my mind, there was this voice that was like, you're not living up to your potential. You're not seeking self-actualization. But, my behavior was a way to kind of mask this disappointment in myself when I tried to go to college and I didn't complete. I mean, I didn't even realize how devastatingly hard that was until I became pregnant and all these feelings came rushing up. And I realized that I had to go back to school. I had to, I always wanted to get my degrees. I wanted to be Dr. Jett, so I had to go back. Mary Ellen, you had your hand up.
We're short on time, but I did want to tell Danielle, when I was in graduate school, I was in a seminar with about 15 people who were getting ready to write their master's thesis. Only 2 of those people had been told they were college material. Everybody else had been told by a guidance counselor, you're not college material, you'll never make it. So check out your mentors too.
Yeah, I'm so lucky because within the system, within the school system, no one ever discouraged me from learning or reaching my goals. I had a speech impediment. I had a speech therapist. She hugged me and filled me full of love. I had a third grade teacher who just embraced me and, you know, said wonderful things about me. I remember one time I had head lice in school and I felt like such a pariah. And my third grade teacher came up, Mrs. Shelton, who I'm Facebook friends with her. She came up and she gave me a big hug when I had head lice. And she said, they only like the clean heads. I remember that's exactly what she said to me. And she just filled me full of love. I'm so grateful. My fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Hooley, she told my sister's class was 4 years behind me. She told them if anyone was going to be the first woman president of the United States, it was going to be Louise. So I just had these people constantly affirming me and lifting me up, and they led by example. And those people that touched me in the way I wanted to be like them. So I was very, very fortunate in that way. Now, I was an unpopular kid. I was a fat kid. So I don't know if sympathy played into my teachers taking up an interest in me, or if they actually did recognize talent. But either way, their affirmation made me believe in myself. And I tell my students, when you love yourself, it's like being surrounded by a protective bubble. And it doesn't make things not hurt, but it helps lessen the blows. You know, so self-love is so important.
I'm gonna share that one with my kiddo. I like that one a lot. We are running out of time. Thank you so much for everything that you said this morning. It was lovely. Learned so much. I really appreciate it. We have just a couple of announcements. In 15 minutes, 11:45, we're going to do a colloquy. I think we're going to use this same link. Is that true? Yes. Okay. So if you're interested in joining that, please log in, take a break and then come back. It'll be great. Next week, I'm going to put the address in the chat. We are having an in-person living ethics discussion platform at that's supposed to say 1200 Triangle Drive in St. Peter's. We're going to be outside. We're going to be socially distanced. They have benches, picnic tables that are there, enough to seat about 24. So if you want to bring a chair, that's also an option. Can a little dog come? I would think so. It's outside, and I don't know. I don't. Anyone else want to say for sure?
I think animals could probably come.
Well, I don't know. I think that needs to be checked with the apartment.
Probably if leashed, yeah. Yeah, I would think leashed would be the thing. Yeah. So that's it for all the announcements that I have. I didn't get any messages. Is there anything anyone wants to share quickly? Announcements I forgot in the last minutes? Stephen, I saw your hand.
Oh, just a quick thought about the topic in terms of mistakes. And it's a quote from James Garner, the actor, and many of you probably remember him. And he picked it up from one of his characters in the TV show Maverick. And the quote was, "Make lots of mistakes, just make sure they're your own."
Yes.
Yes.
So on that, I'm going to share my own quote. This is a poem that I wrote that is very, very fitting for this topic, and we're going to end on this. This is called Keep Trying. Trying is brave because failing is inevitable, and it does hurt to fail, but try anyway. It is brave because the failing hurts so badly. The trying is worth it though, so try. Keep trying until you have it, are it, see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, can embrace it, have become it. Try until you are, try until it is, just keep trying. Don't stop. You are brave enough to try, brave enough to fail, brave enough to try again. Keep trying, fail, and try again and again. Keep going, be brave, be you, just try. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I hope to see you all in 15 minutes.
Yes, you'll have to log out and log back in so Sarah can stop the recording, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect. See you guys all soon if you're coming to the con. Bye.
Bye.